Hello and welcome to another video. This will be the first of a series in which we analyze law breaking within the Fallout universe and try to explain it in a way that makes sense with the in-game universe. And what better way to start than with the ultimate law break that causes Fallout nerds to spontaneously combust? Billy Peabody, also known as Billy the Ghoul Kid who was stuck in a fridge. Billy Peabody is a ghoul child who was found stuck within a fridge. Apparently when the bombs fell 200 years previous, Billy took shelter within it and subsequently became stuck inside. And there he remained, rotting like a banana in the back of the fridge until the sole survivor came across his cries for help and released him from said fridge. Billy asked to be returned to his parents in his hometown of Quincy, stating that he's lost and disorientated. He exclaims with surprise at the state of the world around him, seemingly shocked that everything is blown up. After navigating a gunner slaver who sought to buy him, Billy is then returned to his parents who, like him, have become ghouls. The gunner slaver from before returns in force to lay claim to Billy, who is then subsequently defeated by the sole survivor and Billy's parents. Billy and his family then live happily ever after, with Billy coming to terms with his place in the post-war world. Many people absolutely hate this quest as it breaks a huge amount of in-game lore. For one, Billy was stuck in a fridge for 2 centuries without needing to eat or drink anything. Although there are examples of ghouls not needing to eat or drink to survive, there are also ghouls who claim that they do need to do so. This would also completely undermine the plot of the original Fallout, as the ghoul leader of Necropolis states that they need the water chip to survive. Still, erring on the view that ghouls don't need to eat or drink, it's extremely hard to believe that Billy has been locked in a tight dark space for 200 years without going insane or feral. He has also apparently been on the side of a very well-travelled road for all this time, kilometres from his parents' house, without anyone finding him. And so, let's have an attempt at trying to explain this disgustingly law-breaking quest. The key theory I have is that while we are led to believe from dialogue that Billy had jumped in the fridge at the outset of the Great War, this instead could have been from a more recent event. Therefore, Billy has been stuck in the fridge not for 200 years, but only for a month. Basically, Billy didn't hide in the fridge when the bombs fell, but instead when the Quincy massacre occurred. When asked about how he came to be in the fridge, he states,
"It happened so long ago, back before everything got wrecked. When I heard the sirens, I tried to find someplace safe. When everything started to shake and fall apart, I just crawled inside. When it got quiet again, I tried to get out, but there isn't a handle on the inside."
Approximately a month before the game begins, the Gunners launched a brutal assault on the post-war community of Quincy. Quincy was described as the largest and most prosperous settlement in the southeast of the Commonwealth, with a community large enough to support multiple shops, infrastructure, and even a mayor. Billy refers to Quincy as his hometown, which does apply to pre- or post-war times, but it could be considered that he and his family were members of this community before it was conquered by the Gunners. In relation to his surprise at the devastation to Quincy, and his explanations that he hid when things began to shake and fall apart, it could be explained that the Gunners' assault against the combined forces of the Minutemen and Quincy residents was particularly devastating. In their attack, the Gunners had blown out the multi-level highway's support beams, causing the road to collapse to the ground, something that would have caused tremendous damage and noise. Baker, one of the Gunner commanders, possesses a Fat Man, a weapon that launches miniature nukes at targets, which would have been used to lay waste to the town. The Quincy massacre was also one of the most destructive battles in recent memory. That would explain why Billy is so surprised to see it in such a state. Not because he has pre-war memories of the town, but because he lived there when it was one of the largest communities in the Commonwealth. It's also highly unlikely that the wreckage of Quincy is purely a remnant of pre-war times, given that it was host to such a large settlement. In particular, one that contains Sturges, a mechanic who emphasizes the importance of repairing settlements and fixing them up to working order. It is important to note that Billy does not outright state that he's from pre-war times. Something that leads further evidence to this fact is that almost immediately after finding Billy, the player is approached by Bullet, the gunner who seeks to purchase Billy as a slave. It seems a little coincidental that after immediately freeing one of the only child ghouls ever seen in the game's history, a slaver shows up wishing to purchase him. A slaver who discusses the fine points of owning a ghoul, claiming that they don't age, don't eat, and are immune to radiation. Bullet is a ranking officer with the Gunners, and therefore would have a connection to the company stationed in the Quincy ruins. The group who had assaulted the town would know who the town's residents were, either from witnessing them directly or interrogating captives, and would no doubt be aware of such a rare commodity like a ghoul child. I therefore believe that Bullett's encounter was not simply a twist of fate. He had obviously known where Billy's parents lived, but knew he wasn't there. He had been searching for him in the weeks after the massacre, knowing that he had escaped. Another point is that for an individual who's been locked inside a cramped dark space for 200 years, Billy seems perfectly fine, apart from being a ghoul. Disregarding the fact that he hasn't eaten or drank anything for 200 years, he seems perfectly healthy. His eyes adjust to the blinding sun upon being released, whereas the sole survivor was blinded after returning from Vault 111. His legs and arms are perfectly fine, despite the fact they've been bent out of shape for so long. He's also a lucid and sane individual. He's 200 years old, but still functionally a 10-year-old boy, one who's able to make jokes and who can discuss rational topics despite being stuck within a literal sensory deprivation tank for centuries. Also, for a kid who seems to have no concept of the post-war world, he seems fairly attuned to some of the dangers of it. If the player states that they can't help him locate his parents, Billy, a kid who was apparently just released from a fridge, claims that if they don't help him, he'll be attacked and eaten by a monster. He therefore appears to have a concept of how this new world works, just a slightly sheltered view of it, which leads me to my next point. Billy is a post-war child, but he is a sheltered post-war child. He is surprised on his transformation into a ghoul, and exclaims that his parents are all burnt up like him. His father takes the time to explain to him that they're now ghouls, stating that although most folks tend to die when exposed to the trigger of radiation, they instead are one of the lucky ones. Now most Wastelanders do know what a ghoul is. However, it's important to note that the Commonwealth is a particularly xenophobic place against ghoul kind. Mayor McDonough led a political campaign in Diamond City that led to the eviction of ghouls from the city, fueled by anti-ghoul hatred and prejudice. Although the in-game scale makes it hard to fathom, Diamond City is basically the capital of the Commonwealth. It's the most important trading hub and links many of the communities together. All other major settlements don't contain ghouls, apart from the ones that we create as the player. Ghouls are instead relegated to more undesirable locations such as Goodneighbor, or to their own segregated communities such as the Slot. It honestly may just be the case that, having lived a relatively sheltered life within a large and prosperous community like Quincy, Billy had not personally met any ghouls. He might have heard stories of them. Ghouls can be seen in the nearby ruins of Jamaica Plains, but his knowledge may have stemmed purely from the wasteland prejudice that all ghouls are mere ferals. Seeing himself and his parents in a decaying but lucid body may not have initially twigged to him that they are ghouls. This may be a pretty humongous stretch, since if this is the case, Billy's parents would have had to become ghouls in the space between when they were separated during the Quincy Massacre, which was basically a month. They did state that they wandered for some time before returning home, so perchance, within that month, they encountered some heavy radiation that caused them to turn. Billy's ghoulification process is a bit easier to fathom, even with the shorter time span. The fridge would have essentially been a pressure cooker in an area that experiences some of the very severe radiation storms that come from the glowing sea. The fridge evidently had an air supply, as otherwise Billy would just be dead no matter what, so radiation no doubt would have been able to seep through. Being stuck within the fridge, Billy would have soaked up an immense amount of radiation that caused him to come out looking like an overcooked piece of meat. And so there we have it. Billy, the ghoul kid, is not a pre-war child who got stuck in a fridge when the bombs fell. He is instead a post-war child who hid during the Quincy Massacre and then became ghoulified in the process. As mentioned previously, Billy never states outright that he is a pre-war ghoul. The player character can ask if he's been in there for 200 years, and Billy just responds that he doesn't know, but it's been a long time. Being stuck in a fridge would suck, no doubt about it, but Billy is also a child who was stuck in a sensory deprivation tank. A month may have felt like centuries for him. That being said, this is all an attempt to try and explain away the giant lore breakage that Billy causes with his stupid, frail child ghoul body. The quest is definitely set up to insinuate that he hid when the bombs originally fell. I believe Billy's parents even outright state they were unable to take shelter when the bombs were launched, which is fairly conclusive. However, maybe they too were just referring to the recent outbreak of war in their hometown of Quincy. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this attempt at trying to rectify this giant plot hole of lore. Thank you for watching, and please let me know if there's any other burning gaps in lore that you absolutely hate that you'd like me to try to explain away.